Hey guys. If you were born a child of ancient Mesopotamia, your very first breath would be thick with the scent of hot clay and reed smoke, your tiny lungs filling in air that was already baked by the late morning sun, and you would be lying on a worn, hand-woven mat spread over the cool-packed earth of a mud brick courtyard, shaded by a patchwork of date palm fronds tied together overhead to block the glare. Your skin, fresh from the womb, would be slick with oil and dusted faintly with powdered clay to keep it dry, your limbs thin and wiry, your head much too large for your small, swaddled body, and your hair, if you had any, would be dark, sticking in damp spirals to your forehead as you kicked softly against the folds of the linen wrap. You probably wouldn't survive this, if we're being honest, because half the newborns in your time never did. And if the summer fever or the river cough didn't take you, then the ever-present gnats buzzing in the corners might carry some tiny sickness you couldn't fight. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you are and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the heavy hands of the midwife lifting you, her palms rough from years of kneading bread and carrying water jars, and she hums an old lullaby that's older than even the city walls, a tune that has no beginning or end, like the river itself. She passes you to your mother, who leans back against a reed mat propped against the wall, her cheeks flushed and her hair clinging to her temples. Her fingers, stained with the faint orange of henna from a festival weeks ago, trace the outline of your tiny nose, as if trying to read the future in your face. All around, the courtyard smells of wet clay and goat milk, with the faint metallic tang of the bronze water jug in the corner, its surface glinting dully in the heat. The home is small, its walls built from sun-baked mud bricks pressed with the thumbprints of the men who stacked them. A low doorway leads into the sleeping room, where mats are rolled against the wall, and in one corner, a clay jar holds the last of the winter grain, guarded jealously from rats and nosy neighbors. Outside the courtyard, the narrow lanes of the city are alive with the shuffle of sandals, the bray of donkeys, and the sing-song of women selling onions and lentils. Somewhere, a child cries, and a pot clatters to the ground. Your father is not here, at least not yet. He is likely at the city gate, where men gather to talk of weather and trade, or perhaps he is at the workshop, shaping wooden yokes for oxen. But he will come, eventually, bringing with him the smell of sweat and wood shavings, his eyes bright with the satisfaction of having a son or daughter, though, in truth, the city values boys more, for they can inherit and work the land without as many legal complications. For now, you are only a small bundle in your mother's lap, her arms a shield against the heat, the flies, and the thousand little dangers of the city. She whispers something low, not in warning, but in hope. Hope that you will grow to walk these streets without shame, that no neighbor will ever hiss your name in a gossip-laden breath, that no elder will ever see you standing in judgment beneath the city gate for a crime that, in this land, is punished more harshly than theft or even violence. She knows, as everyone knows, that in Mesopotamia, the rules for the heart are written in clay and baked hard by the sun, and once set, they cannot be undone without a price. Your first meal is goat's milk, thin and warm, dribbled carefully between your lips from a reed straw. It tastes faintly of grass and the animal's hide, and you take it greedily because hunger is a constant here. The midwife smiles when she sees you drink, muttering that you are strong, but she still ties a small glue bead around your wrist to ward off the evil eye, for strength alone is not enough to survive this place. Beyond the courtyard walls, the streets are filled with heat and the soft scuff of sandals on dust. You can't yet know that in these same streets, one day, some man or woman will be paraded for the shame of loving the wrong person, that drums will beat and children will jeer, that riverbanks will be the final test of innocence or guilt. But the clay remembers. The laws, etched into tablets and read aloud by scribes, are already waiting for you, silent and patient, just as they waited for those who came before you. As the sun begins to tilt toward the west, your mother lays you in a shallow reed basket lined with scraps of wool, the fibers soft and slightly scratchy against your skin. The air smells of drying fish from a stall nearby, mixed with the sweetness of dates left in the shade. A gentle breeze drifts in from the river, carrying the promise of cool night air and the distant hum of voices. You twitch in your sleep, unaware that the city is alive with rules, that every door hides stories of love, betrayal, and the strange, quiet punishments that follow. For now, you are simply alive, and in this world, that is no small thing. You wake in the heat of the day, your tiny fists curling and uncurling against the edge of the reed basket, the soft scratch of woven fibers brushing your knuckles as the muted buzz of flies hovers somewhere above. The air is thick and unmoving, heavy with the smell of crushed garlic and damp earth, and in that drowsy, still moment you feel the faint shadow of someone leaning over you. It is your mother, her face framed by strands of hair that have come loose from the braid she tied at dawn, her eyes dark and watchful, as though she is memorizing your every twitch and breath. She tilts her head slightly, as if weighing the way your lips purse when you dream, the little furrow between your brows, the almost imperceptible kick of your legs. She has seen newborns before, too many, but you are hers, and that changes everything. Her voice is low, almost a hum, carrying the rhythm of the lullabies sung in this city for generations. They are meant to soothe, but they also carry warnings tucked into their verses, little reminders that life here is always lived under watchful eyes. She whispers to you in a tone that blends tenderness with a kind of practical calculation. You will have to grow into someone careful, someone who knows where to stand and when to look away, someone who can laugh at the right moment and never let your smile linger too long on a face that is not your own. In the courtyard, the midwife has returned, this time to check the clay seal on the water jar, making sure no neighbor has stolen a scoop during the night. She and your mother speak in low, steady voices, trading observations about the weather, hot enough to crack the ground by the riverbank, and about a woman down the lane whose husband has not been seen in 3 days. You don't know it yet, but stories like this will float through your life like the smell of baking bread, familiar and irresistible. The husband's absence will soon sprout 2 explanations. Either the traders delayed him at the market, or he has been seen with someone who is not his wife. In this place, the second explanation always seems to gather more listeners. Your mother's eyes linger on you with the weight of unspoken fears. She knows the city's laws as well as she knows the cracks in the courtyard walls. If you are a girl, she worries about the strictness of the elders, how easily a moment of careless affection could lead to disgrace. If you are a boy, she worries about the same laws, for the tablets make little distinction when it comes to this crime. The punishments are designed to crush desire, not to balance fairness. The midwife makes a passing remark about the clay tablets at the city gate, and your mother presses her lips into a thin line. Everyone has walked past those tablets at some point, their baked surfaces etched with cuneiform signs that spell out cold judgments. Who is guilty? What will be done to them? And in some cases, what they must pay to be spared. Your father arrives in the afternoon, the sound of his sandals scraping the packed earth announcing him before he steps into the courtyard. He is broad-shouldered, his tunic dusted with sawdust, and his forearms shine faintly with sweat. He kneels beside your mother, studying you with a frown that slowly softens. You are smaller than he expected, your wrists so thin he could wrap his thumb and forefinger around them. Yet there is something in your eyes, though you cannot yet focus, that makes him think you might endure this life. He touches your forehead with the side of his finger, then pulls back as if afraid of leaving his work-calloused coarseness on your soft skin. They talk over you, speaking in half-finished sentences and old idioms. They speak of your future as if it can be shaped like wet clay, pressed here, smoothed there, carved with the right lines so that it hardens into something strong enough to stand. But underneath their planning, you catch the rhythm of worry in their voices. They know that a good life here is not just about hard work and full granaries, it is about avoiding the wrong sort of attention. A neighbor's word, a misread glance, a whispered accusation, these things can change everything overnight. A shadow falls across the courtyard as a neighbor leans over the wall, offering a small basket of figs in welcome. She peers down at you, her smile polite but her eyes already measuring, the way people here do without even realizing it. She comments on how much you resemble your mother, and then, too quickly, mentions the case of a young woman from the other end of the street who was seen talking too long to the spice merchant. Your mother's hand tightens on your swaddling cloth, but she smiles, nodding in that careful way that lets the conversation drift away without offense. By evening, the air cools enough for your parents to carry you outside. The street is narrow, lined with mud brick walls, whose surfaces bear fingerprints from the builders who shaped them years ago. The smell of roasted onions drifts from a nearby doorway, and somewhere, someone is beating a drum in a steady, calming rhythm. As they walk, your parents pass the city gate. There, leaning against one of the great timbers, is a scribe with an armful of clay tablets, his stylus tucked behind his ear. You can't read them yet, but those tablets hold the rules that will loom over your life. In a corner, one tablet in particular is darker than the rest, its edges smoothed by many hands touching it. This one lists the punishments for adultery, a grim inventory that includes public humiliation, fines of silver, and in some cases the river trial. Your mother glances away from it. Your father pretends not to see, and the scribe continues to scratch lines into another fresh tablet, as if the story of the city can be captured in marks pressed into wet clay. You don't understand yet, but you will. And when you do, you will remember this quiet walk under the fading sky, the way your parents' steps quicken just slightly as they pass the place where judgment waits in silent, baked permanence. You grow into your first years beneath the weight of heat and habit, your days marked by the soft slap of your bare feet on the packed earth and the constant hum of voices spilling over courtyard walls. By now you can toddle through the narrow lanes, your small hands trailing along the rough mud brick walls, feeling the warmth they hold from the afternoon sun. Your world smells of sesame oil and baking bread, of goat dung in the alleys and damp reeds drying in bundles for basket making. You do not yet understand the rules that bond your city together, but you are already aware of the way people lean in close when they speak, how they glance over their shoulders before whispering, and how their eyes sharpen when the topic shifts to someone else's private life. It is impossible to avoid gossip here. Even the smallest courtyard seems to amplify it, letting words slip through cracks and read screens like smoke through roof beams. When you sit at your mother's side while she grinds grain on the heavy stone, she often pauses to listen to the voices drifting from the neighbor's home. Sometimes it's about a trader who cheated the weight on his scales. Sometimes about a boy who ran away from his apprenticeship. But more often than not, it's about who was seen with whom and for how long and at what time of day. You can feel the way the air tightens when certain names are spoken. One afternoon, while you are playing near the threshold with a clay ball that rolls in unpredictable wobbles, you hear the baker's wife telling your mother that a woman named Ela from the far end of the street has been visiting the potter's stall a little too often, and not just to buy jugs. Your mother only smiles faintly, mutters something about the quality of the potter's wares, and then turns the conversation to the price of dates. You notice the baker's wife doesn't press the matter. She has delivered her piece, planted it like a seed, and knows it will grow on its own. The children of the lane are miniature versions of their parents in this art of overhearing and passing along. Even as you chase one another around corners or splash in the shallow water channels, you hear them repeat phrases they've picked up from home. She stayed too long. He was seen by the temple. They closed the shutters. You might not know the full meaning, but you can sense that these are not the same as stories about stolen figs or missing sandals. These stories carry a sharpness, a danger.
In the evenings, your father returns from the workshop, smelling of cedar shavings and the faint bitterness of resin. He tells you little tales while you sit on his knee, stories of donkeys that wander into market stalls, of fishermen who swear the river stole their nets. But every so often, his tone changes, and he mentions the laws of the heart, in that measured, almost formal way adults use when they want to warn without frightening. He might point toward the city gate and remind you that it is not just a place of trade and arrival. It is also where people stand when the elders call them to account. One evening, as the sun sinks low and the light turns the walls into slabs of glowing copper, you follow your parents to the market. You walk past stalls piled high with onions, leeks, and baskets of figs. Between two stalls, you notice a small knot of women bent close together, their heads nearly touching. They aren't laughing. Their voices are a fast, urgent hiss, like wind pushing through narrow reeds. Your mother steers you away, but you glance back and see them straighten suddenly, their expressions wiped smooth, as if nothing at all had been said. The market is not just a place to buy and sell. It is the beating heart of the city's information, and you learn that here news spreads faster than water in a broken jar. One day, it might be about a caravan delayed by bandits, another about the temple's need for more offerings. But when the subject is infidelity, the stories seem to pick up speed, as if the words themselves can't bear to be still. At home, in the quiet after the market, you notice your mother and father sitting close together, their voices low. You catch only a fragment. They'll be called before the elders. Your father shakes his head. Your mother presses her lips, and the conversation ends when they see you watching. You don't know who they are, but you sense it has something to do with those whispers you hear so often, the ones that make adults glance around before speaking. You fall asleep that night to the sound of the street, someone calling out to lock the gates, the last shuffle of feet on the packed earth, the distant bark of a dog. The air is thick and warm, but your mind drifts toward those fragments of conversation, those small, sharp seeds of scandal that grow quietly in the cracks of your city. One day, you will understand how quickly they can turn into something much larger, something with real weight and consequence. For now, they are only background noise, like the hum of flies or the rustle of reeds in the night breeze. But the city is already teaching you to listen.
You are older now, perhaps 5 or 6, old enough to walk with your father to the edge of the street where the great timbered gates stand, their thick beams blackened by years of sun and dust, the iron studs hammered deep into their faces like a line of blunt teeth. Beside one of the gates, shaded by an overhanging awning of woven reed mats, stands the law tablet. It is not small. Your head barely reaches the bottom edge, and the surface is the color of baked river clay, its cuneiform signs pressed in neat, unwavering rows that catch the light at certain angles. Your father stops here, shifting the weight of the sack on his shoulder, and gestures toward it with the kind of solemnity he uses only at the temple. This is where everyone learns the rules, he tells you, his voice low. You tilt your head back and squint at the rows of wedge-shaped impressions. To you, they look like patterns made by bird tracks and wet mud, but your father explains that they speak of what is allowed, what is forbidden, and what will happen if the forbidden is done anyway. He points to a section near the middle, his calloused finger hovering just short of the surface, as though touching the words might wake them. This is where the punishment for adultery is written, he says. It has been here longer than you have been alive, longer than I have been alive, and it will be here long after we are gone. You try to imagine how such rules could outlive people, how they could stay baked into the clay while everything else changes. But you are distracted by a scribe at the next table, rolling out a fresh slab of wet clay. He presses his stylus with calm precision, each mark deliberate, as if the world might split if the lines are not perfect. You wonder if he feels the weight of what he writes or if it has all become routine. Another day, another list of names, another tally of fines or sentences. The tablet is not guarded, yet no one dares to damage it. You learn that damaging a law tablet is itself a crime, one that can bring the same severity as the wrong it describes. This is not just a signboard. It is the city's memory, its unblinking eye.
People gather here to read, or more often to have the words read to them by someone who knows the script. Sometimes an elder will stand here and declare an accusation, the name of the accused echoing into the market square until it becomes the only thing people talk about that day.
You see a man approach now, his tunic plain and his eyes downcast. He speaks to the scribe in a hushed tone, glancing over his shoulder twice before continuing. The scribe listens, nods, then makes a few quick impressions into a smaller piece of clay. Perhaps a summons, perhaps the start of a case. Your father waits patiently for him to finish, then nods in greeting. The man barely acknowledges you before slipping away into the crowd. On the walk home, you ask your father what happens when someone is found guilty. He doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he adjusts the sack on his shoulder again, his gaze fixed on the line of rooftops in the distance. Finally, he says, "It depends on the elders, on the witnesses, and sometimes on the gods. But the tablet tells everyone what can happen, and if it is written here, it will happen sooner or later." The words settle in you like warm stones, heavy and unshifting. That night, as you lie on your reed mat, listening to the creak of the roof beams in the cooling air, you picture the tablet again, its lines of signs as unchanging as the stars. You think of it as something alive, not in the way people are, with breath and hunger, but in the way a river is alive, always flowing in the same direction, unmoved by the struggles of those who stand on its banks. In the weeks that follow, you pass the tablet often, usually on errands with your mother or father. Each time you notice something new, a faint chip along the edge, the way one row of signs is deeper than the others, the scribe's careful hand tracing a wet sponge over its surface to keep the dust from softening the marks. Sometimes you see people standing there in clusters, listening as a reader announces a judgment. The crowd's reaction is always the same, a murmur, a ripple, and then the quick dart of eyes to neighbors, as if to measure who might be next. It becomes part of your understanding of the city. The tablet is not just stone and clay. It is a mirror in which everyone fears to see their own reflection. Even as a child, you sense that the rules written there are not distant or abstract. They are waiting, patient as a shadow, for the moment they might be turned on you.
You grow leaner and taller, your feet hardening to the cobbled grit of the market streets, your hands stained from helping your mother knead dough into flat rounds that puff and darken over the clay oven's hot dome. Bread is your daily anchor, flatbread baked each morning, eaten warm with a smear of goat cheese or dipped into bowls of lentil stew thickened with onions and garlic. Alongside it, you drink date beer, cloudy and sweet, the kind everyone drinks because the water can turn on you if you trust it too much. Its tang clings to your tongue, a reminder that even something as simple as quenching your thirst here comes with its own quiet caution. Meals are taken in the courtyard, where the shade shifts slowly as the sun arcs overhead. You sit cross-legged on woven mats, your fingers tearing bread into pieces to scoop food from shared bowls. There is comfort in the repetition, the same movements, the same smells, the same clink of clay cups on the packed earth. But even in these peaceful moments, the undercurrent of warning is never far. It comes in small comments from your parents, as casual as a joke, but with edges that catch if you think about them. Your father might remark on the neighbor's boy, who now works at the grain store, and how it's best for him to keep his eyes on the sacks, not the customers. Your mother might tease the midwife for fussing over her hair before going to the temple, but the way she says it carries a meaning you can almost, but not entirely catch. These warnings come wrapped in humor, but their purpose is sharp, to remind you that people notice everything here. And in a place where rules about loyalty and desire are etched into law, the wrong notice can be as dangerous as illness. The law itself feels distant to you still, a thing for adults. But the stories you overhear while chewing bread or sipping beer bring it closer. You hear of a man who paid his weight in silver to avoid the river trial after being caught with a woman not his wife. Another time, you hear of a woman who claims she was only delivering bread to her cousin, but the elders decided otherwise. The details vary depending on who tells the story. Some make it sound like a tragic mistake, others like a shameful spectacle, but the ending is always the same. The law acts, and the life you had before is gone.
In the market, you begin to notice certain glances. A spice seller who lets his eyes linger a heartbeat longer on a young woman's face. A shepherd who brushes past the same stall twice in one morning. You don't yet fully understand what's happening, but you see the way others do. The slight narrowing of eyes, the way one woman's voice drops when she points it out to another. In this city, a smile can be as dangerous as a blade, though it leaves no wound you can see. On the way home from one market day, your mother carries the bread while you hold a small bundle of onions. As you pass the city gate, you see the tablet again, the sunlight striking its edges so that it glows against the darker wall behind it. This time, you notice a small cluster of people standing before it, their faces tight, their bodies angled just enough to block your view of whoever is at the center. You catch a glimpse between them, a man with his head bowed, his tunic dusty, speaking softly to the scribe. The crowd whispers around you, their voices threading together into something restless. You ask your mother what's happening, but she tells you to keep walking. Back home, you sit with your bread and beer, chewing slowly while the day cools into evening. The distant sound of a drum marks the closing of the city gates. You think about the man at the tablet, about the eyes that followed him, about the way even a simple act like buying bread or drinking beer can place you in the path of someone else's judgment. The rules are written in clay, but they live in people's mouths. You are starting to understand that survival here means not only eating well and working hard, but knowing when to speak, when to smile, and when to keep your gaze fixed firmly on your own cup.
You are nearly grown enough to run errands alone, your legs strong from walking the dusty lanes, your eyes sharper now, catching things they once slid past without notice. The market is no longer only a place of smells and colors, it is also a place of currents beneath the surface, invisible but always moving, and you have begun to see how a single look can set those currents spinning. It happens most often in the slow lull of the day, when the morning's rush has faded and the heat has driven most into the shade. That is when the eyes wander, and the smallest gestures take on meanings that may or may not have been intended. In the marketplace, you watch a young woman pause at the melon seller's stall. She runs her fingers lightly over the smooth, striped skin of the fruit, but her gaze lingers not on the melons, but on the seller himself. It is a look so brief you might have missed it if you weren't watching closely, a glance that says something more than a question about price. He notices. You see the corner of his mouth twitch upward before he looks away too quickly, as though the weight of what passed between them has already been felt. No one else seems to have noticed, yet you know better. There are always eyes that notice. Later, as you carry a sack of lentils through the narrow alleys, you hear two older women murmuring under the awning of a spice stall. Their words are low but quick, and you catch fragments. At the melon stall, too long, someone will say something. It's like watching the first spark in dry reeds, small, almost nothing, but with the certainty that it can grow into something much larger. You start to see how the dangers your parents spoke of can come from something as simple as an extra heartbeat in a glance. No one here needs proof the way the law might demand on a tablet. In the court of the street, suspicion alone is enough to change the shape of your days. A man might find his customers fewer and his greetings colder. A woman might feel eyes following her every step, not with admiration, but with the quiet appetite of judgment.
At home, your mother tells you of an incident years ago, before you were born, when a neighbor was accused because she had been seen fetching water at dusk in the company of a man whose wife was away. She insists it was an innocent meeting. They had grown up together, carried water side by side for years,
But the timing, the quietness, the way they walked close enough for their shadows to merge, it was enough. She was summoned to the gate, and though she survived the judgment without punishment, her name never returned to what it had been. You carry that story with you the next time you walk to the gate. The law tablet is still there, its edges worn, its signs sharp as ever. The elder's bench nearby is shaded, but you can feel the heat that must settle there when someone stands before the accused. You imagine the weight of all the eyes that would be fixed on you, some curious, some pitying, some eager for a verdict. You imagine the stillness of your own breath as you wait to learn if your life will continue as it is or if it will be broken in two. And in the evenings, when you join the family for bread and beer, the warmth of the courtyard walls pressing close, you notice how your parents' talk shifts when certain names come up. The words become slower, heavier. A pause might stretch before they change the subject entirely. These silences teach as much as the words. They teach you that in this city, even a harmless glance must be weighed before you give it, because someone, somewhere, will count it against you if they choose. The Elder's Bench is a place you have walked past many times, always in the shadow of the city gate, its seat carved from thick planks set upon heavy stone blocks. When you were younger, it was simply another piece of the city's furniture, a thing you barely noticed except to step around the men who sat there. Now you understand that it is a stage, and that whoever stands before it is part of a performance watched by everyone who happens to pass. Today you linger a little longer than usual, pretending to study a merchant's bolts of dyed wool across the lane while your eyes flick to the scene unfolding at the bench. Two elders sit there, their backs straight despite the heat, robes falling in heavy folds over their knees. Their hands rest on their thighs, still but for the occasional slow stroke of a thumb over knuckles. Between them, a clay tablet rests on a wooden stand, the stylus laid neatly beside it. Before them stands a man, mid-aged, tunic dusty from travel, eyes fixed on the ground. His hands are clasped, not in humility, you think, but in an effort to keep them from fidgeting. His voice is low, barely carrying beyond the bench, but you catch the sound of another voice behind him, sharper, belonging to a woman whose eyes flash as she speaks. The elders listen, their expressions shifting so subtly you can't tell if it's disapproval or simply the effort of concentration. They ask questions in slow, even tones, as though they have all the time in the world, as though no verdict will come until the air itself has weighed in. The man answers without looking up. The woman gestures once toward the gate, toward the open road beyond, as if to remind them that he has been seen there with someone else. Around you, a small knot of people has gathered. No one speaks loudly, but the murmurs are steady, like the rustling of reeds in wind. A boy nudges his friend and whispers something that makes them both grin quickly before glancing away, suddenly serious again. You sense that for them, and maybe for many here, this is entertainment as much as it is justice, an afternoon diversion served alongside the thrill of knowing someone else's business. You think about the stories your parents have told you, about how standing here is almost as damaging as any punishment that might follow. The bench is more than wood and stone. It is a place where the accusation becomes real, where the words are given shape and weight, pressed into clay for others to see. Even if the verdict is mercy, the shadow of this moment will follow the accused into the market, to the temple, to every doorway where someone leans to talk. When the questioning ends, one elder picks up the stylus and makes a few deliberate impressions in the tablet. The man bows slightly and steps back, his gaze still fixed on the ground. The woman watches him go before she too turns away. The crowd disperses in twos and threes, their voices rising a little now, freed from the need for silence. You hear only fragments. He'll have to pay. Lucky it wasn't worse. She's not finished with him. When you walk back through the market, you can still picture the man standing there, caught between the slow patience of the elders and the sharper judgment of the crowd. You imagine yourself in his place, feeling the sun press on your shoulders, knowing that everyone within earshot is storing away your story to pass along later. And you understand, more clearly than before,
that in this city, the elder's bench is not simply where justice is given, it is where your life can be rewritten in a single afternoon, carved into clay that will remember you long after the crowd has forgotten your face.
You hear of the river long before you truly see it. It exists first in stories, whispered warnings from your mother when she wants to end a conversation, or half-spoken threats overheard at the market when someone's tongue has been too free. The Euphrates is not just the giver of life here, the source of water for your bread and beer, the cool ribbon that makes the dust-baked city possible. It is also the place where innocence and guilt can be decided, where bodies are surrendered to the current as though the river itself is a judge with its own sense of truth. The first time you go with your father to watch a trial by water, you are told not to stand too close. The crowd is thick along the bank, people jostling for a view, and the air smells of wet mud and crushed reeds. At the center of the attention is a man, barefoot, his tunic soaked and clinging to him, his hands bound loosely in front of him with a cord. 2 guards flank him, their spears planted in the earth, their eyes scanning the crowd more than the accused. An elder stands on a flat rock, reading from a clay tablet in a slow, deliberate voice. You catch certain words, wife, temple, night, and the crowd murmurs at each one. The punishment is simple in description, but terrible in practice. The accused must step into the river and surrender himself to the current. If the gods believe him innocent, the story goes, the water will bear him back to the shore. If not, the river will keep him. Of course, you hear from others, more practical, more cynical, that swimming skill plays as much a part as divine will, but such doubts are rarely voiced near the elders. The man wades into the water, his feet sinking into the soft silt, his face pale but steady. The current pulls almost immediately, the brown water swirling around his knees, then his chest. He stumbles, regains his footing, then pushes forward into deeper water. The crowd is silent now. The only sounds the rush of the river and the occasional flap of a bird's wings overhead. For a moment, you think you see him make progress toward the opposite bank. Then the current catches him sideways, spinning him slightly, and he disappears beneath the surface. A sharp cry rises from the crowd, not of grief exactly, but of finality, the sound of a door closing. Moments later, the river releases him, washing him onto a sandbar downstream. 2 men run to drag him back to shore, coughing and gasping. The elder declares something. Your father says later it was a verdict of guilt, and the man is led away, shivering in the hot sun. You notice the crowd has already begun to break apart, drifting back to their stalls and workshops, the spectacle finished for the day. On the walk home, your father explains the old belief that the river is a more honest judge than people, because it cannot be bribed or fooled. But he also admits, in a low voice meant only for you, that some trials are arranged to ensure the accused steps into a part of the river where the current is cruelest. He tells you to remember that, to never mistake the appearance of fairness for its truth. In the nights that follow, you dream of the river, not as a place of peace, but as a restless thing, its surface hiding decisions you cannot see until it is too late. You think of how many names it must have claimed over the years, how many lives it has sealed with the quiet pull of its current. And you know, deep down, that in this city, the river is not only a source of water, it is also a keeper of secrets, swallowing them whole and carrying them away where no one can follow. It begins with a low, steady beat, the deep thump of a drum that you feel in your chest before you truly hear it. The sound grows louder as the procession approaches, winding through the narrow streets like a slow-moving tide. People lean out of doorways or perch on low walls to watch, and you join the small crowd gathering along the lane, the press of bodies warm against your shoulders. The air smells of dust, stirred by many feet. mingled with the faint sweetness of figs drying in a nearby courtyard. At the center of the procession walks the accused, head lowered, steps measured, hands bound loosely with a length of twisted cord. Behind them, a boy no older than you carries a small drum, striking it with a stick in a rhythm that is too slow to be festive, but too steady to be mournful. 2 guards flank the accused, each holding a short spear, their eyes scanning the crowd as if daring anyone to interfere. Around them, the people murmur, passing the story from one to another so that by the time it reaches the edge of the street, the details have already shifted. Some say the crime happened at the temple. Others say in a storeroom at the market. No one agrees entirely, but everyone agrees the crime is real enough for this public walk of shame. The route is deliberate. It winds through the busiest parts of the city, past the market stalls, the temple forecourt, the water wells, places where many eyes will see. Children dart alongside, whispering to each other, their curiosity barely contained. Some laugh, some mimic the slow pace of the accused, until a sharp glance from an elder sends them scattering. In one doorway, a woman turns her face away, as though the sight alone might stain her. In another, a man leans forward, eyes bright with something between pity and satisfaction. Your mother stands beside you, her lips pressed tight, and when the procession passes, she does not speak until the drumbeat has faded. Remember, she says softly, this is part of the punishment, to be seen. You understand. The shame is not just for the accused, it is for their family, their friends, anyone who might be connected to them. It is a net cast wide, catching more than just one person. You follow at a distance, careful not to look too curious. At one point, the accused glances up, and for the briefest moment your eyes meet. You are startled by how ordinary they look. Tired, perhaps, embarrassed, but not monstrous. It strikes you that the punishment is not about removing someone from the city, but about marking them so that they can never truly return to the life they had before. When the procession finally reaches the city gate, the accused is brought before the elders, who sit waiting on the bench you know so well. The drum stops. The crowd holds its breath. The accusation is read aloud from a clay tablet, each word deliberate, so that no one can claim ignorance of the charge. Then the verdict is given. Not the full sentence, not yet, but enough to seal the person's fate. They are led away again, this time toward a place you cannot follow. On the walk home, the streets feel quieter, though you know the story will be told and retold in dozens of courtyards before night falls. You can almost hear the shape it will take. A rise in the voice here, a lowered tone there, a knowing glance to emphasize the most scandalous part. And you understand that in this city, the procession is only half the punishment. The other half lives in the mouths of the people, carried on their breath long after the drumbeat has faded.
The story reaches you before you see the man. It comes in fragments, drifting across the market like the smell of baking bread. Easy to follow if you're listening, impossible to avoid even if you're not. A man from the far quarter has been caught, they say, and not just caught, but branded. The mark pressed into the flesh of his forehead for everyone to read. You imagine it before you know the truth. A black smudge, perhaps, or a painted sign like the ones above shop doors. But this is not paint. Paint fades. This is burned into skin, a scar that will heal but never disappear. You see him days later, at the edge of the market. He walks slowly, as though unsure whether to move through the crowd or skirt it entirely. People part around him without touching, the way they would step aside for a man carrying a basket of wet clay, careful not to smear themselves. The mark is dark against his skin, the shape unmistakable even from a distance, though you are too far to read its full detail. You've heard it is a stylized wedge pattern, a sign that those who know the law will recognize instantly. It's not large, but it doesn't need to be. It draws the eye without trying, like a fly on the rim of a cup. Your father murmurs that this is one of the harshest punishments, short of death or exile. The man will eat, work, and sleep among his people, but the mark will go with him everywhere, silent and visible, a warning to others and a weight for him to carry. There is no hiding from it. No turban or scarf will be allowed to cover it in public, and even in the cool privacy of night, he will feel its raised edges when he runs a hand across his brow. In the days that follow, you see how the brand shapes the air around him. Some merchants refuse to serve him directly, making him wait until others have gone. Children follow at a distance, daring each other to get closer, to look longer, to ask him questions. Women pause mid-sentence when he walks past, their eyes lingering for just a heartbeat before sliding away. Even those who seem kind enough to greet him carry that moment of hesitation, the brief flicker that says they remember exactly why his skin bears that mark. One afternoon, curiosity pulls you closer. You find him alone at the edge of a well, drawing water in slow, careful motions. The mark is clearer now, a series of sharp, deliberate lines that mean adulterer to anyone who can read the signs. You can't help but stare. He notices, and instead of looking away, he meets your gaze. His eyes are not angry, not even ashamed, but something deeper, something like exhaustion that has settled into him like dust into cracks. You look down quickly, embarrassed, and walk away without drawing water. That night, your mother tells you about the old belief behind the brand. It is said that the gods see all, but people forget. The mark, then, is to make forgetting impossible. It is a promise to the community that no matter how many seasons pass, the wrong will remain visible. But she also tells you that sometimes the mark outlasts the crime, not in justice, but in cruelty. Some who bear it have long since paid in silver, in labor, in shame, yet still they walk beneath the same stairs, as if the punishment is renewed each day they are seen. As you fall asleep, you think of him at the well, the rope creaking in his hands, the water jar filling slowly. You think of how it must feel to carry a piece of the law on your skin, a sentence that cannot be erased. And you understand that in this city, there are punishments that end with a verdict, and there are punishments that live on the body itself, speaking for the law long after the elders have gone silent.
Your father joins you at the fence, his brow furrowed. He explains that this form of punishment is meant for those whose guilt is considered certain, but whose sentence stops short of death or exile. The gravel immobilizes them, not as a danger to their lives, but as a constant reminder of their helplessness. And the garden's openness makes sure that their humiliation is shared widely. It is not just the weight of the stones, he says quietly, but the weight of the stairs. At one point, a boy from your street passes by, clutching a basket of bread. He hesitates, then walks into the garden to hand a piece to one of the accused. The elders watch, but do not interfere. The law does not forbid kindness, only forgetfulness. The man takes the bread, chews slowly, his eyes fixed on nothing in particular. You wonder if it tastes different here, eaten under the gaze of so many. When the sun dips lower and the shadows grow long, the ropes are finally loosened. The gravel slides away from their waists as they are pulled free, their steps unsteady after so long without movement. They are led away without ceremony, the garden returning to its stillness, waiting for the next time it will be used. On the walk home, you think about the way the stones held them, how something so ordinary could become a prison when arranged with purpose. You think about the stories that will ripple out from today's gathering,
how their faces will be described, how their posture will be remembered, how even those who were not here will feel as if they had been. And you realize that in this city, the garden is not a place of growth, but of preservation, keeping shame alive in the memory of everyone who passes its low, crumbling fence. There is a place near the edge of the city where the walls give way to a wide garden enclosed by low stone fences, their tops uneven from years of settling. You first hear about it in whispers, children daring each other to sneak there, older women shaking their heads when the topic comes up. It is not a garden for beauty, though fig trees shade parts of it, and the ground is covered in gravel that glitters faintly under the sun. It is a place for punishment, and those who are brought here do not come to enjoy its shade. One afternoon, curiosity pulls you to the far lane that leads there. The air is still, the sound of the market fading behind you, replaced by the rasp of your sandals on the packed earth. You stop before the fence and peer through a gap. Inside, you see two figures waist deep in the gravel, their arms bound to their sides with thick rope. The gravel piles against them in a way that makes it impossible to move more than a fraction. Their faces are set in expressions that seem less fearful than resigned, their eyes flicking toward the small group of elders standing nearby. A woman, older than your mother but still strong, stands apart from the others. She is the one speaking, her voice carrying clearly over the fence. She tells the story of what these two have done, or what they are said to have done. The details are drawn out like a weaver pulling yarn from a skein, each thread examined, turned, and held up for all to see. The words are measured, deliberate, with pauses that let the listeners exchange glances, shake their heads, murmur in low tones. The gravel crunches softly under the feet of those who shift their weight as they watch. The punishment here is not swift. The accused remain in the gravel for hours, sometimes a whole day, while people come and go to hear the accusations, to see the faces, to remember them. There is no wall to shield them, no drum to lead them through the streets, only the slow, steady exposure to every eye that chooses to pass. The sun presses down, reflecting off the pale stones so that the heat rises in shimmering waves. Flies circle lazily around their heads, landing and leaving with no resistance.
The temple stands at the heart of the city, its great ziggurat rising tier upon tier into the hazy sky, the baked bricks warm to the touch even in the early morning. You have walked past its gates many times, carrying baskets of barley or jars of beer as offerings with your mother, but until now, you have not understood that within these walls, decisions are made that can spare a person from the harsher punishments of the law, or seal their fate even more firmly. The elders hold the power of judgment, but the priests hold the power of divine pardon, and in a city where the gods are said to watch everything, that power is no small thing. You hear the first story of such a pardon from your father, spoken in a low voice as you help him oil the wooden yoke of a cart. A woman, accused of adultery and certain to face the river trial, was brought before the high priest instead. She offered not silver or grain, but her service to the temple itself, cleaning the courtyards, tending the lamps, preparing food for the lesser priests. The high priest declared that the gods would accept her devotion in place of the harsher sentence. The elders did not protest. The temple's word can outweigh even the baked clay certainty of the law tablet. It is not always mercy that is given here. Another story drifts through the market a week later, told by a man selling dyed wool. A merchant accused of the same crime came to the temple to seek forgiveness, but the priests refused him. The gods, they said, could not be placated by a man who had already broken oaths to them. He was sent to the river the next day, and no one saw him return. Whether it was the current or his own guilt that claimed him, no one could say for sure. One afternoon, you find yourself at the temple gate when such a hearing is taking place. The courtyard is cool under the shadow of the ziggurat, the air scented with incense and the faint tang of oil lamps.
A man kneels before 3 priests seated on low stools, each wearing robes edged with embroidered symbols of their patron deity. He speaks quickly, his forehead touching the ground, his voice carrying desperation in every syllable. One priest listens with his eyes closed, as if weighing each word in the balance of the unseen. Another watches the man's movements closely, as if seeking the truth in the way his hands tremble. The third makes notes on a small tablet, his stylus scratching softly.
The crowd here is smaller than at the riverbank or the elders' bench, but the tension is no less heavy. These hearings are not public trials. There is no drumbeat, no procession, but everyone knows the outcome will travel through the city within the hour. The man finishes speaking, and a long silence follows, broken only by the faint rustle of a priest adjusting his robe. At last, the high priest speaks, his voice low but firm. The gods will allow the man to atone through offerings and labor for the temple. The words are met with a sigh of relief from the man, who bows so low his forehead touches the cool paving stones again. On the walk home, you think about the strange balance between the temple and the law. The clay tablet at the city gate feels unyielding, its words baked into permanence. Yet here, in the cool shade of the temple, those same words can be bent, or even set aside entirely if the gods, or at least their servants, will it. You wonder how many seek mercy here before facing the full weight of the law, and how many are turned away into the sunlit glare of judgment. That night, lying on your mat, you picture the man kneeling before the priests, the cool stone beneath his hands, the scent of incense in the air. You think about the way the gods are said to see all, and how sometimes it is men in embroidered robes who speak for them. And you realize that in this city, salvation is not only a matter of what you have done, but of who you can persuade to speak for you in the shadow of the ziggurat. You begin to notice how often silver changes hands in the quiet corners of the city, not with the clink of coins on a merchant's table, but with the softer sound of a pouch passed from one set of fingers to another. Your father tells you that for many crimes, including adultery, there are times when the law will accept payment instead of harsher punishments. It is never spoken of as buying freedom, but that is what it feels like, turning the weight of the law into something that can be measured in silver or grain, and then setting that weight aside. The first time you see such a bargain being made is at the market near the grain store. 2 men stand close to the wall, their heads bent together, one holding a sealed clay jar about the size of a loaf of bread. They speak quickly, the words barely more than a hum, and then the jar is handed over. The man receiving it glances around before tucking it into the folds of his robe and walking away, his face calm, almost bored. Your father, who is beside you, mutters that the jar contains silver enough to satisfy the wronged family of an accused man, and that the elders will soon declare the matter closed. Sometimes, the payment is in grain, livestock, or cloth rather than silver. You hear of a case where a woman's family offered 2 goats and a bolt of fine linen to the husband she was accused of betraying. The exchange was made at dusk, in a courtyard lit by a single oil lamp, with only a scribe and 1 elder as witnesses. The next morning, her name was absent from the tablet of public accusations, as if the crime had never been pressed into clay at all. Your mother explains that such arrangements are not mercy, they are transactions, as much a part of the city's life as the selling of figs or the trading of wool. For the wronged, they are a way to reclaim honor without the spectacle of public shame. For the accused, they are a way to avoid punishments that could follow them forever. Yet not everyone can afford them. The poorest, she says, must face whatever the elders decree, for they have nothing to offer but themselves. You pass a scene one morning that makes this truth sharper. A man stands outside a house with a small pouch in his hands, speaking to another man in the doorway. The second man shakes his head slowly, his arms crossed over his chest. The pouch is lowered, and the first man's shoulders sag. He walks away alone, the pouch still in his hands, and you know without asking that the price offered was not enough. Somewhere, the river or the elder's bench is waiting for him.
In the evenings, as you drink your cloudy date beer, you think about this strange part of the law. The clay tablets speak with a voice that sounds final, but in practice, silver and grain can make that voice quieter or even silent. It is a reminder that justice here is both fixed and flexible, depending on who you are and what you have to give. And you begin to understand that in this city, guilt can be heavy, but the weight is not always measured in shame or punishment. Sometimes it is measured in the heft of a pouch, in the gleam of silver under lamplight, in the smooth feel of a bolt of cloth being folded and handed over as though it were nothing more than a gift between neighbors.
The market is never truly quiet, but there are corners within it where the noise softens into a kind of low hum, a place where conversation hides in plain sight. You've learned to recognize these spots, the shaded side of the spice stall, where the scent of cumin and cinnamon masks low voices, the narrow gap between the potter's shelves where his tallest jars block the view from the street, the back corner of the grain store where the air smells faintly of dust and mice. This is the market of secrets, and it runs alongside the market of bread and fish, as constant and essential as the flow of water through the city's channels. It is here that you hear the quickest whispers about who has been seen with whom, where, and for how long. The words slip between sales of barley and copper pots, carried in the same tones as haggling over prices. You see how skillfully people can hold two conversations at once, one about the weight of dates in a basket, the other about a woman whose husband works on the river barges and who has lately been smiling too much at the scribe who keeps the temple's accounts. A casual glance toward a passing customer is enough to send the message along without another word spoken. Some traders seem to collect these stories as eagerly as they collect coins. You notice the cloth merchant near the gate, who always greets people warmly, but whose eyes follow certain pairs as they move together through the market. You hear him drop a remark here, an observation there, never so directly that it could be called an accusation, but always with enough weight to make someone else lean in and listen. By the end of the day, his bolts of fabric may be lighter, but so too is the city of its newest secret. It has been handed over to the air to be carried and reshaped. Your mother tells you once, as she inspects onions at a stall, that the market is the safest and the most dangerous place for such talk. Safest because the noise covers the words. Dangerous because the noise makes people think they cannot be overheard, when in fact there is always someone listening. She warns you never to stand too long in the same spot when you hear such talk. If you linger, you may be counted among those who carry the story forward, whether you speak or not. One afternoon, while fetching lentils, you catch sight of the baker's daughter passing a small clay token to the butcher's boy. It is no bigger than your thumb, its surface scratched with a mark you don't recognize. They do not speak, but their eyes meet for the briefest second before they step away in opposite directions. Later, you hear a fishmonger mutter that the baker's daughter has been walking in places she shouldn't, though he doesn't say what those places are. The token, you suspect, is part of that story, a clue passed through the market's unseen hands. You begin to realize that in this city, the market is not only a place of trade for goods, but for stories. And stories, unlike figs or wool, do not lose their value when they change hands. They grow sharper, more polished, sometimes even more dangerous. You understand now why your father always told you to keep your ears open and your mouth closed here. Because once your voice adds to a story, you can't take it back. And in a place where certain kinds of stories end in public shame or worse, silence is worth more than silver. As you carry your sack of lentils home, you pass the law tablet at the gate. The cuneiform marks seem unmoved by the day's swirl of trade and whispers, but you know that behind them, many of those stories began here, in the shade of the market stalls. The clay may hold the final word, but the market decides which words will reach it in the first place.
The first time you see one, It is almost by accident. You were sitting in the courtyard at dusk, the day's heat still clinging to the bricks, when your neighbor slips through the doorway carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She doesn't speak much, just nods to your mother, places the bundle on the low table, and leaves before the oil lamps are lit. When your mother unwraps it, you see a small clay tablet, no bigger than your hand, its surface marked with neat lines of cuneiform. At first, you think it's an account of grain or a list for the market, but your mother's face changes as she reads. Her eyes narrow slightly, her mouth pressing into a thin line. She wraps it again quickly and tucks it beneath the reed mat where she sleeps. Later, you learn what it was, a love letter, written in clay, the kind of thing that should never have been found by anyone except the person it was meant for. These tablets are not common, for they are risky. Unlike spoken words, they can be held, hidden, stolen, or, worse, read aloud by someone who was never meant to hear them. And in a city where the law treats certain kinds of love as a crime, finding one in the wrong hands can be as dangerous as being caught in the act itself. You hear other stories of such tablets, some passed between neighbors under the cover of darkness, others hidden in baskets of figs or tucked inside jars of honey. They are rarely long, often no more than a few lines, a promise to meet at the well after dusk, a whispered compliment carved into permanence, a sign that two people share something they cannot speak openly. The marks in the clay are sharp when fresh, but with time they soften, edges wearing smooth, as though even the tablet itself knows it should fade. Once, while helping your father repair a cracked wall near the gate, you overhear two men talking about a case where a letter was discovered, not by a spouse, but by a younger brother. Too young to understand fully, he brought it to the elders, thinking it was a message for trade. The letter was read aloud in the square, its words twisting in the mouths of those who heard them. By the end of the day, the two named in it were summoned to the bench, their meeting place already crowded with those eager to see the accused. Your mother warns you never to touch such a tablet if you come across one. She says, if it isn't yours, it could burn you all the same. And you know she doesn't mean fire. She tells you that the safest words are the ones carried only in the mind, where no scribe can copy them, no clay can preserve them, no neighbor can find them in the folds of your robe. Still, you can't help imagining the people who write them. Somewhere in the city, a man leans over a lump of clay, his hand trembling as he presses each mark, knowing that every stroke deepens both the message and the danger. Somewhere else, a woman tucks a small tablet beneath a jar of lentils, her heart racing not at the words themselves, but at the risk of them arriving at all. These moments exist in the quiet spaces between the city's noise, in shaded courtyards and storerooms after the market closes, in the pause between footsteps on the stairs. As you fall asleep that night, you think about the bundle your mother hid beneath her mat and whether she still has it, or if it's already been returned or destroyed. You think of the clay hardening, holding its words long after voices go silent. And you realize that in this city, love written down is a dangerous thing, for it leaves footprints where the heart wished to walk unseen.
The nights in the city are never fully dark. Even after the market stalls are shuttered and the temple doors closed, there are torches flickering along the main streets, their smoke curling upward into the star-scattered sky. The light is meant to keep thieves away, but you know it does more than that. It chases shadows from corners where they might be hiding things other than stolen goods. The night watch moves through these streets, their sandals scraping softly on the packed earth, the wood and bronze tips of their spears catching the torchlight. You first notice them when you are sent to fetch water after dusk, a task your mother gives reluctantly. The air is cooler, carrying the scent of the river and the faint tang of fish from the day's catch. Two watchmen pass you, speaking in low voices. One carries the torch while the other scans the alley ahead. They nod at you, but their eyes keep moving, checking doorways, listening for sounds beneath the hum of the night insects. You hear them pause near a narrow side lane,
the torchlight spilling into its darkness. A moment later, a low voice answers from inside, too quiet for you to catch the words, and then the scrape of footsteps retreating quickly into the distance. The watch is not hunting only for stolen jars or missing goats. You hear from your father that more than once they have stumbled upon people meeting in secret, couples who thought the late hour would hide them. In some cases, they are left with a warning: go home, be wise. In others, the watch escorts them directly to the gate, where the elders are called even from their beds if the matter is urgent enough. You begin to see how the torch itself is part of the punishment. When it swings into a dark corner, it drags whatever is there into the open for all nearby to see. In the tight, twisting lanes, a single torch can draw a small crowd before the watch even reaches its destination. Those caught in its light often bow their heads, turning their faces away as though from the sun. You can tell it is not the brightness that stings them, but the way the light seems to strip away the layers of privacy they thought the night had granted them. One evening, you lingered too long by the well and see the watch escorting a pair toward the main road. They walk a pace apart, neither speaking, their shadows stretching and shrinking with each torch-lit step. The faces watching from doorways are not cruel exactly, but they are hungry for the sight, for the confirmation of a rumor or the birth of a new one. By the time the watch reaches the gate, you know their story will already be threading its way through the city. Your mother tells you that the watch is both feared and respected, for they can protect you or condemn you with equal ease. Their rounds are steady and predictable, but it is said they sometimes take a different path, entering a street from the opposite end to catch those who think they know the rhythm of their patrols. The torch, she says, is not just to see by, it is to remind everyone that someone is always looking. That night, lying awake on your mat, you imagine the torchlight moving through the streets like a restless spirit, slipping into alleys, brushing across faces, catching the gleam of an eye before it vanishes again. You think about how the watchmen's steps are measured, their movements unhurried, as if they have all the time in the world to find what the night tries to hide. And you understand that in this city, darkness offers little cover. The torch and the men who carry it will always come, steady as the river, ready to spill light into the places where secrets think they are safe.
The council meets in a hall not far from the temple, a long, low building with thick walls that hold the heat of the day well into the night. You've never been inside before, but you've walked past enough times to know its sound, voices layered over each other, rising and falling like the hum of the market, except here the words are heavy, deliberate, meant to decide more than the price of onions. When someone is accused of adultery and the matter stirs enough dispute, it is here that the elders gather to argue whether the punishment should be swift and severe or tempered with something softer. You find yourself near the doorway one evening when such a debate is in progress. The air smells faintly of lamp oil and dust, and the faint glow from within stretches across the packed earth at your feet. Inside, the elders sit on low benches arranged in a wide circle, their faces lined with age, their eyes sharp despite the hour. A clay tablet lies in the center on a woven mat, the accusation written clearly for all to see. One elder speaks first, his voice slow but firm. He insists that the law is clear, that the crime deserves the full measure of its prescribed punishment, no exception, no hesitation. His words carry the rhythm of something memorized long ago, as though he could recite the law even in his sleep. Across from him, another elder leans forward, palms open, arguing that mercy should be shown. He speaks of the accused's family, of their years of service to the city, of the fact that mistakes made in passion are not the same as theft or murder. His tone is quieter, but each word is shaped to settle into the minds of those listening. Around the circle, others add their voices, some echoing the call for strictness, others weighing in for leniency. They speak of past cases, drawing comparisons, reminding each other of times when mercy led to peace, or when it led to worse. Occasionally, a scribe interrupts to read aloud from older tablets, the wedge-shaped marks catching the torchlight as if the clay itself were glowing. Each reading seems to slow the debate, as though the presence of the written law makes every man pause before speaking again.
From your place near the doorway, You can see the way the elders' faces shift, not just from the force of arguments, but from the pull of their own reputations. No one wants to be remembered as the one who was too harsh when mercy was due, or too soft when the city demanded firmness. You realize that these debates are not only about the accused, they are about how each elder will be remembered when their own names are spoken in the market. The discussion stretches deep into the night, the voices growing rough from use, the oil lamps burning low. At last, the head of the council calls for a decision. The vote is taken not with raised hands, but with the placing of small clay tokens into a jar, smooth for mercy, rough for severity. The scribe counts them slowly, announcing the tally in a steady voice. Tonight, mercy wins by a narrow margin. The accused will face a public procession, but will be spared the river trial or branding. As the elders rise and the hall empties, you step back into the shadows, unnoticed. The air outside feels cooler, lighter, though you can still hear their voices in your head. The firmness of law, the pull of compassion, each one wrestling for dominance. You think about how easily the outcome might have shifted if just one token had been different. How a life in this city can hinge on the quiet drop of clay into a jar. That night, you lie awake, imagining your own case being argued in that circle. Elders speaking for and against you, their words mixing with the memory of the market's whispers. And you understand that in this city, the council's debate is as much a trial as anything held at the gate or the river. Only here, the verdict is born from the clash between law and the softer, riskier choice of mercy.
Beyond the outermost lanes of the city, past the last mud brick walls patched with straw, there lies a stretch of barren steppe. It begins with scrub and dry grass, but the further you walk, the more the earth turns to cracked clay and pale dust, broken only by the low hum of wind across emptiness. Few go there willingly, for there is little to find. No water, no shade, no shelter from the sun that seems sharper here, as if the gods themselves were watching without blinking. It is here that the sentence of exile is carried out, and it is a punishment so feared that even those who have faced the river trial speak of it with a shiver. You first hear about such a sentence when you are helping your father repair the reed fence in your courtyard. He tells you of a man, once a merchant with a fine stall in the market, who was found guilty of lying with another man's wife. His family could not pay the silver to settle the matter. The elders refused to soften the verdict, and the temple offered no pardon. He was given bread enough for 3 days, a skin of water, and told to walk beyond the walls until the city could no longer be seen. There would be no return. To step back inside the gates after exile was to invite immediate execution. The thought of such a walk stays with you. You imagine the man's feet stirring the dust, each step carrying him further from the only streets he had ever known. Behind him, the city walls would shrink, the watchtowers fading into the shimmer of heat, until there was nothing but the horizon. Ahead, the land would stretch without end, the light shifting from harsh white to the red of evening, and then to a darkness deeper than anything within the city. The nights there are colder than most imagine, and the stars seem closer, brighter, indifferent to the fate of the one who lies beneath them.
You hear of others who have been sent into exile, some said to have survived by finding work in faraway towns, others never seen again. The truth is that the steppe is not empty. It holds its own dangers, wandering bands who prey on travelers, snakes that hide beneath the stones, storms of dust that can strip the skin raw. And perhaps worst of all, the silence, a silence so complete that even your own breathing would feel like an intrusion. Once, while carrying water from the well, you overhear 2 elders discussing the sentence for an accused woman. One argues for the river trial, the other for exile.
The first says, the river gives a swift answer, innocent or guilty, while exile lets the punishment linger, stretching over every day of the life that remains. It strikes you then that exile is not about the moment of leaving, but about every moment after, when the exile must live without the voices, smells, and rhythms of the place that made them. Your mother says that exile strips more than your home from you. It strips the shape of your life, the small things you did without thinking, greeting the same vendor each morning, hearing the same drum at dusk, knowing which streets would be in shade at midday. Without these, a person begins to forget who they were, and that forgetting is its own kind of death. That night, you stand at the edge of the lane, looking toward where the step begins beyond the far wall. You think of the merchant, of the others whose names are no longer spoken aloud, and you feel the weight of the city behind you, its walls, its laws, its people. You realize that in this place, exile is not merely being sent away, it is being unmade, your name and your place in the world fading into the dust as surely as your footprints vanish under the endless wind.
The years gather on you like layers of silt after the river's flood. Slow, steady, and impossible to notice until you look back and see how much has changed. Your hair has thinned, your knees ache after long walks, and you now spend more time sitting in the shade of your own courtyard than wandering the streets. Yet the stories of the city still find you. They drift over the walls with the voices of neighbors, carried by the same idle breezes that once brought the smells of bread and roasting onions when you were a child. You are no longer a listener on the edge of such tales. You are the one who is asked to tell them. Children from the lane come to you with wide eyes, asking if it is true that a woman once escaped the river trial by swimming under the current to the far bank. You nod, though you soften the story, leaving out the part where she was dragged back by the watch before she could disappear into the date groves. Other times, they ask about the garden of gravel, the branding, the exile. You tell them only enough to make them careful, not enough to make them fearful, though perhaps you think a little fear would serve them well. You have seen enough to know that the city has not changed its ways. The elders still sit at the gate, the law tablet still stands in its place, its marks as sharp as the day you first squinted up at them from a child's height. The watch still walks the night with their torches, the temple still opens its gates to some and closes them to others, and the market still hums with whispers that move faster than the smell of fresh bread. Yet there is a difference now. You feel the weight of these stories in your bones, as though each one has settled there over the years, making you heavier in ways you cannot shake off. Sometimes, when the heat is low and the air is still, you remember faces from long ago, some ashamed, some defiant, some too weary to feel either. You wonder where they are now, if they survived their punishments or vanished into the silence beyond the walls. You think of the merchant sent into exile, the branded man at the well, the woman in the gravel garden. Their names are rarely spoken anymore, but their shadows still walk the streets if you know where to look.
The young people do not believe you when you tell them how quickly a life can change here. They laugh and say they are careful, that they keep to their work, that the law has nothing to do with them. You smile at their certainty, but inside you think of all the others who once said the same. It is not only the reckless who find themselves before the elder's bench, it is also the unlucky, the misread, the ones who happened to be in the wrong place when the torchlight passed. In the evenings, as the last light fades and the street begins to glow with the orange flicker of lamps, you sit by the doorway, your knees drawn up, your hands resting on them. The city feels quieter at this hour, though you know it is only resting before the next day's business of gossip and judgment. Somewhere in the distance, a drum beats once, twice, the sound carrying on the still air. You know it is not for a procession tonight, but the sound still makes you glance toward the gate. You have become the kind of elder who shakes their head slowly before speaking, letting silence hang just long enough for the listener to lean closer. You know that a warning given too quickly loses its weight. And so you speak in the same rhythm the city has taught you, slowly, deliberately, each word carrying the memory of the punishments you have seen. In this way, you give the younger ones what your parents gave you, not fear alone, but the understanding that here the law is not only in the clay tablet, it is in the eyes of the people, the shape of the streets, the beat of the drum, the torchlight in the dark.
The day comes quietly, without ceremony. You wake to the sound of pigeons in the eaves, their wings brushing the reed mat that hangs to shade your doorway, and for a moment you forget your age, your joints, the long years behind you. The air smells faintly of warm dust and the smoke of a neighbor's morning fire. You rise slowly, your hands pressing into your knees for balance, and you move through the courtyard, where the light spills across the worn stones you have crossed thousands of times. This is the place where you were first placed as an infant, where your mother bent over you with her henna-stained hands, where your father's shadow once fell long across the ground as you carried sacks of grain from the gate. Your name is still spoken in the city, but not with scandal, at least not yet. It drifts instead in the calmer tones of familiarity, a neighbor who has lived here a long time, a voice that knows the old stories, someone who has seen the city change and not change at all. The punishments for adultery are still as they were when you were a child. The river still pulls hard. The gravel garden still waits beneath the fig trees. The elder's bench still stands in the shadow of the gate, and the torch still makes its slow rounds through the alleys at night. You know these things will remain long after you are gone. In your final years, you walk less often to the market, but when you do, you see how the patterns repeat. A certain glance between two people, a whisper carried from stall to stall, the crowd that gathers just before the drum begins. It is always the same rhythm, the same careful dance between secrecy and discovery, between law and the spaces just beyond its reach. You carry these observations like pebbles in your pocket, their weight small but constant. The younger ones come to you, still, asking for advice they pretend not to need. You give it sparingly, letting them believe they've coaxed something rare from you. Be careful where your eyes rest, you tell them. The city watches, even when it seems asleep. They nod, but you see the same certainty you once carried in your own youth, the belief that warnings are for others. Perhaps they will remember your words when the drum beats, or when they pass the law tablet and see their own thoughts reflected there in the unblinking wedge marks.
One evening, you sit in your doorway as the sun sinks and the streets cool. The market's noise fades into the soft clink of pots being stacked, the smell of bread baking for the next day. Across the lane, someone tells a story, their voice low but animated, and you know without hearing the words that it is about someone's foolishness, someone's heart, someone's mistake. The city hums with it, as it always has, and you feel both part of it and apart from it, as if you are already fading into the spaces between its sounds. When the day finally comes that you do not rise from your mat, the city does what it always does. It notes your passing, briefly, and then folds you into its history. There is no drum for you, no torchlight parade, only the slow movement of neighbors bringing water for the washing, the soft prayers murmured in the courtyard. Your name is spoken a few more times, then less and less, until it becomes one of those mentioned only when a story needs a detail from long ago. Yet some of your warnings will live on, passed without your name, woven into the quiet fabric of the city's caution. And somewhere, the law tablet will still stand at the gate, its marks unchanged, waiting for the next set of eyes to squint up at them and wonder how long such rules can last. In this way, you remain, not in the clay, not in the law, but in the pauses between words, in the careful glances that choose not to linger. The streets grow dim in your mind's eye,
The air still warm, but no longer heavy. You hear the slow beat of a drum far away, not for you, but for someone else beginning their own walk through the city's judgment. The sound grows softer, until it is only a rhythm in your breathing. The light fades, the hum of the market fades, and at last, so do you.
And now, as the night settles around us, you can let the weight of these streets fall away. The torches have been extinguished, the market stalls covered, the clay tablets sleeping in their places at the gate. Imagine the city under a blanket of deep, steady silence, broken only by the slow sigh of the river beyond the walls. The air is cooler now, carrying the scent of dust and distant water, and the breeze moves gently through the alleys as though it has no urgency at all. You are no longer walking them. You are simply floating above, looking down at the pattern of rooftops and courtyards, the pale threads of the lanes winding between them. Somewhere a single oil lamp still burns, its glow spilling just far enough to touch the edge of a doorway, but not enough to disturb the rest. The hum of voices, the beat of the drum, the clink of silver in hidden hands, all of it has been folded into the quiet. Here, in this stillness, there is no judgment waiting for you, no eyes measuring the length of your glance, no whispers following your steps. You are free to let go of the weight of caution, the vigilance that the city demanded from your first breath to your last. The clay tablets cannot hold you now, the river cannot pull you, the garden's gravel lies untouched. Breathe in slowly, as if drawing in the cool night air above the Euphrates. Let it settle deep in your chest, unhurried. Breathe out just as slowly, as though releasing the last threads of the day. The warmth of the courtyard stones is gone now, replaced by the soft comfort of rest, and the shapes of the city's walls dissolve into the dark until only the stars remain. You can stay here as long as you wish, in the space beyond the market's noise and the law's weight, in a place where even the watch's torchlight cannot reach. The world is distant, the air is light, and the only thing you must do now is drift. Drift into the gentle quiet, where nothing is asked of you, and nothing is waiting to be answered. Sleep comes easily here, and it will keep you, safe and unseen, until the morning.